I'm Scott Hambrick.
I'm Karl.
And I am Trent Jones.
And we three weird strength coaches are all going to be discussing string quartets today here on the Music and Ideas podcast. And we were talking about freaks that we have trained in the past for strength. Good freak, right? There's bad freak where you've got like an extra arm or something. These are good freaks. Karl was just telling us he had a guy who came in to learn how to use the barbell and to get strong, who as a what we would call a novice, squatted what, Karl?
600.
So
that's a lot of weight if you don't know.
If you don't know, that's a lot.
Yeah, most people are never going to do 600.
No, in a whole career. And by the way,
Well,
if you don't know that 600's a lot of weight, then you're probably strong AF.
Well, he's just a big guy. He was 6 foot tall, even 300 and something pounds, not enormously obese, huge hands, like size 14 feet.
Yep.
Just an enormous skeleton. And there are people like that.
There's giants among us.
There is a bell curve, and there are people on the right side of that bell curve.
It's funny because I played at a house party, I guess you could call it, over this weekend. There's just some friends that I had met, and they invited me to come over and jam with them. We played a few songs together and just had a little party.
Good for you.
It's quite countercultural, these days. But anyway, so we did that. It's funny because I don't think of myself as a big person. When I'm around lifters, I feel kind of small. I'm
Right.
5'8", 200 pounds. And but around these musician folks, I just felt like enormous.
Right.
I just feel like this ox in the middle of the room, and
Did you break a chair like Chris Farley?
I feel like I am. I feel like you got to be careful shaking those guys' hands. You
You do. You might just crush them
bust
like a
some
bird.
knuckles, right? Yeah, and it's just funny because then I get around actual strength athletes, and I feel quite small.
It's enormous. We used to. I mean, it's enjoyable. I am 6 foot. I am short of 6 foot, 5'11", and 250, and I'll like catch sight of myself. We'll be walking with my family who are normal sized or small, and there'll be the mirror, and there's like normal kid, normal kid, normal kid, normal kid, normal woman.
Freak.
It's a huge thing, and so we used to have these conferences we go to every year with all of our strength coach friends, and part of the joy of doing that was so that I could feel normal sized. Mm-hmm. Next to say Matt Reynolds, who's a little taller than me, and I guess now he's about 30 pounds heavier.
My Pashaw. Matt's probably 310.
Yeah,
Well, he's bigger than me.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
he's a big guy.
So folks that don't do what we do don't understand that when you're 6'1" and you weigh 310 and you squat 600, you're not fat. You just shake the picture frames crooked in the hallway when you walk down the hall, and flight attendants hate to see you coming, and you're just a giant among men. That's what that means. You have a 725 deadlift, and you got a 40-inch waist, right? But you can't see your spine. So it's not the same kind of 40-inch waist where it's all the meat's in front and the meat's in the back, you see.
yeah.
Yeah. Your guy Kirk, what did he do the other day?
Yeah, Kirk, he's an Online Great Books guy. He's in seminar number 1, and he's one of my strength training clients. He's
One of my favorite people.
giant.
Yeah.
Kirk is a sweet, sweet guy. We're taking
Great guy.
applications for a mate for Kirk, by the way. So listen to this. Nobody works harder than Kirk. He reads incredibly difficult stuff. He's a paramedic. He's in the Naval Reserves. He works his ass off, and he's strong as an ox. Kirk's 6'7". He's probably 295, which at 6'7" looks a little gangly. Like if you have a mortal next to him for scale, you'll see that this is a giant person. But if you just see him just like standing next to an oak tree, you're like, he's kind of a skinny guy. He squatted
Very long arms.
Very, very long arms. He squatted, I think these are from memory. I think he squatted 567 and a half. He pulled 638, and he benched 303.1 in a competition setting, all white lights.
That's good.
Last Saturday.
Those long arms. That's hard. Yeah, I remember I met Kirk. Actually, the last time I saw him was, I think, the first or second time I'd ever met him. And this was when he must have just started strength training. And we were doing a strength lifting meet, and in which case you do a shoulder press overhead in that competition. And they had to move the platform for him so that when he locked it out, the plates wouldn't bust out the lights in the ceiling.
10-foot ceiling.
Yeah, he was about an inch from the ceiling.
We got a 6'7" guy. None of this is about string quartets. Well, maybe it is.
Maybe it is, yeah.
They're giants of the field. We have a 6'7" guy who's also an OGB member at Chicago Strength and Conditioning, and he broke the ceiling fan.
Yep.
Just moving a barbell. There's only one place he can lift.
Yeah.
You had to jackhammer the floor up, and he stands in a hole.
Right.
Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff we do. I'm not talented whatsoever. I'm 45, 6'2", weighing about 235, and squat in the low fours and pull in the low fives. And that's what we do. We train ourselves to be better versions of us's, and we do that with our brains, and then we do that with our hands and our feetses and all that stuff. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, I like what you said there. So we're all amateurs here. And if you think about what the word amateur means, I was a bit nervous. I was up until 3 last night going through these scores, and then I got up at 8 to do it a little bit more because I was nervous because there's somebody out there who listens to this show who's going to know more about music than me. You're going to know, like, I was trying to figure out what a rondo is because the last movement's a rondo, I guess, and there's technical things that are going on in this that I don't really know. But then I thought, this is kind of what's good about the show. So we are, Trent is probably the most professional musician among us. I occasionally get paid.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, well, you get paid for it, right?
That's true. I do.
You get paid for it more than I do. I occasionally get paid to come in and sing bass in a choir somewhere or to cantor for, I am not a professional. I'm just a guy that likes music. I've done it my whole life. I got drafted into directing our church choir for a decade or so because there was no one else to do it. And I mean, Scott's played a lot of guitar and he knows everything about everything.
I don't know about that.
I don't know if you ever did any professional music.
I have never made a groat making noises other than with my mouth.
Not even, what is that thing? Not even the ephus thing that you do out in the fields?
Ethan and Iphon? No.
Yeah, and being a professional musician, by the way, it does not necessarily require an enormous amount of skill either. There's a very big difference. There are some incredible amateur musicians out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so so we're approaching string quartets today, and this is a very advanced art form, especially I think the Beethoven thing.
Yeah.
But we're coming at it as amateurs.
Yeah.
And amateur means someone who loves.
Yeah.
So
it shares a root with amor.
Mm-hmm.
Amo, amas, amat.
Amare. Yeah.
Yeah, so my thought on this is, well, all right, I'm not going to know all the fancy buzzwords. I'm not going to know exactly how it modulates. But I wanted to show some of this. I mean, we showed you heavy metal 2 weeks ago. So I wanted to show you, because there's like hundreds of these string quartets, and they're pretty good.
They're really good.
And there's a whole lot of music out there for you to get. And if I can figure it out, you can figure it out.
Speaking of metal, the day we put out the show about heavy metal, Eddie Van Halen died at age 65. Everybody here at the Hamburg House tore up about it. Charity cried over it. Eddie is a big, big deal here. And sad as hell. Not exactly a clean living guy, but that's too soon.
Yeah, I think I saw a picture of him from last year, and I think he was in pretty poor health. So probably a blessing to go when he did, but at the same time, yeah, it's a huge loss. I was thinking about that, and I think one of the things that Eddie did, among many, was he inspired kids to pick up the guitar, including myself, but he also inspired them to be really good. Mm-hmm. I think he made being really excellent at something cool.
He made it look so cool.
And fun, too, right? We talked about how much he smiled, and he's just playing this ridiculous stuff and just smiling, and he's got a cigarette burning in the headstock. I mean, it's cool, it's fun, but he's also awesome at it. And you could tell he's really a student of music and the guitar. So that's pretty cool. I hope that, we can all of us that were inspired by him carry on that torch, and even as amateurs, strive to be really excellent at what we do.
Yeah, Eddie was a big deal, and he had cancer on and off for years and years, and that's still good. But by golly, I loved him, and I'll miss him. Big part of my childhood, and just so good, guys. A little Spanish Fly, a little minute of acoustic guitar from him. He got teenagers to buy records with that on there.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It wasn't just the Ice Cream Man and Hot for Teacher. It was that too, in Cathedral and 316, and really great stuff.
And I think I've got a segue for us here into this episode. One of the things that Eddie has inspired me, and something I aspire to do in my playing in Mimic and Eddie, is that fantastic attack he has on the note. I mean, you can just hear those notes just popping off the fretboard. You can hear his fingers just, they're so percussive the way that he attacks the notes and he pulls off and hammers on with those taps. And he really, I think, was a master of phrasing in terms of his attack and the envelope that he would make when he would strike a note. He had so much expressiveness there, and I don't think anybody has really ever topped him in that department. This is a very unique part of his playing. And that's really one of the things that draws me as a guitar player to this string quartet stuff is I love the way how expressive these pieces are, and the way that strings in particular can emote and use that concept of attack and release and envelope to create textures. That's something that's not really available to piano players and horn players, not to the same extent. But a string instrument that's bowed and plucked can really, there's just so many ways you can strike the same note and get a bunch of different textures out of it.
Well, it's most like the voice, I think, the bowed string instrument.
Yeah, very much so.
I like your comparison to electric guitar is a very, very expressive instrument. And so is the string quartet. And I wanted to show the variety of what could be done here. So a string quartet, if you don't know, it has a cello, it has a viola, and 2 violins.
That's
and
4.
If you look at it on the piano, bottom cello note is here. So the cello is tuned. The viola is tuned. And then the violin is. So you've got from here down to there on the strings, but the violin can go up to here if you want it. So you've got a whole range. You can't go lower than that C, but you don't really want to. If you had a double bass, you'd be rumbling around. But you want to think why the string quartet came about is apparently Haydn's an originator on this. So you would have a bunch of occasional ensembles. In the old days, in ancient times, you didn't have a record player. You didn't have a CD player. You didn't have Spotify. You didn't have streaming music. So if you wanted music in your house, you had to either play it yourself or get people to come and play it for you. You'd have pipe organs in your church. Maybe if you're rich, you have one in your house.
Whoa.
You might have an orchestra, but think of how big an orchestra is.
Inexpensive and hard to organize and schedule, and it's a lot easier to get four players together.
Yeah, but the reason why probably the bass and not the cello is, have you seen how big a double bass is? You can't lug it on your carriage. You can't say, well, the Esterhazys are having a party. Let's go play some music. I have a cello in my house. It's on the big side of portable, but it's portable. I got it for Christmas last year. I haven't really learned to play much. I just play bass lines on it. Like when one of my kids goes and noodles on the piano, I go and play walking bass lines. It's fun.
The cello, too, to me, is maybe the most versatile of the string instruments because it sounds really cool. I mean, it's low enough and it has that beautiful bloom and resonance when you're bowing, and you're playing high up on the neck. In other words, the lower notes. So where it fills in the bass in the low end, but when the cello goes up high, it's almost like how the French horn sounds when it goes up high. It's this very like throaty, kind of rounded off sound. That there's almost a lot of drama when a cello sweeps up high, just in the way that it's the instrument straining to produce those higher notes. But it sounds really good too. It sounds very full up in the higher registers as well as the lower registers.
Yeah, it might be the star of the string quartet, even though there's two violins. The viola is sort of the redheaded stepchild of the. If you hang out in classical circles, they always make fun of the viola players. It's like the saxophone. It's an odd size instrument. It's not big enough for the pitch that it has, so it doesn't have the best acoustics. It plays all the inner parts. Sometimes you don't even. It's hard to pick it out what the viola is doing. So there's an awesome bit of trivia. Haydn, who I picked 3 pieces, and Haydn is one of them. Haydn and Mozart played in a string quartet together. Can you imagine?
Heavy duty.
Mozart played the viola. That must have been the most fun.
A super group.
I mean, speaking of Eddie Van Halen, I think it's a legitimate segue. So if you listen to Haydn and Mozart, Haydn wrote a whole bunch of symphonies, a whole bunch of string quartets, very productive. He's a little overshadowed probably by Mozart because Mozart might be a little better. Might be. But their music is so happy. They're both masters. They're both geniuses. You can just hear them smiling. Like,
Yeah.
Haydn has a surprise symphony where the whole trick is you think it's over and then it's not.
Well, you're nodding off because you ate too much and drank too much before the event, and then he wakes your ass up. We'll do one on that one. We need to do that. That's a great piece.
So I mean, they're the Eddie Van Halens of the age.
Yeah.
And violin, everybody knows about the violin. It's a wonderful instrument, but it's I don't know. I probably like the cello better. We have a viola in the house too that sounds fun. I mean, it's you never hear it as a solo instrument, but it's cello-ish. It's got some of the same quality. Probably the reason it does is just because the cello is so good.
Here's how I know the cello was so awesome. When I was in the 3rd grade, the television show Airwolf debuted. And it had that Bell 222 helicopter in it, retractable landing gear, super cool, looked like a killer whale. And the main character was Stringfellow Hawk, and he played cello. So he was a brooding technician, warrior, mysterious person played by John Michael Vincent, and he would play cello from time to time on the show. And I was in the 3rd grade. I'm like, what is this giant fiddle that he's squeezing with his legs? I must get some of this.
I'm surprised there's not a cello in bluegrass.
Well, we heard a little bit of cello in that Alistair Fraser music that we played on the Bob Wills episode, right? Which is not a traditional Celtic instrument, or at least a traditional Gaelic instrument, but man, it sounds good. Sounds good. It's very versatile.
I wonder if they named him Stringfellow Hawk because of Stringfellow Bar at St. John's College.
I don't know. I wonder if Sherlock Holmes had played the cello rather than the violin, would he have had a happier life?
No.
So I picked 3 string quartets to take a small look at. So the Haydn String Quartet in C major, the Emperor, Opus 76, which I think's more of a traditional string quartet. It's very, very good, but it's going to be the typical sound of a classical period string quartet. And then I picked one by Dvorak, and I had to look up how to pronounce his name, Dvorak, whose cousin, by the way, made the keyboard that I type on.
Mm.
A relative
QWERTY
of his.
keyboard?
Not the QWERTY, I guess we call it Dvorak, but I guess it'd be the Dvorak keyboard. I don't use
So
the standard
wait,
keyboard
are you
'cause I'm
saying
too
that
cool.
you don't use a QWERTY keyboard?
Nope.
He uses the one arranged by the frequency of the appearance of the letters in the
Yes, and it has
Latinate
all the vowels
languages.
on the left side and all the consonants on the right.
Ah.
So you're doing double taps like drummer.
Do you calculate in reverse Polish notation as well?
Yes, in fact, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of course I do. How could you even ask that?
Yeah.
But that one's the one that but he wrote that late 19th century while he was spending a summer in Spillsville, Iowa. It's called the American one, and it's a completely different sound to show you some of the versatility of what this little group can do. And I think it's cowboy music, and we'll get to playing some of it. And then the third one is Beethoven. Is it Opus 131? I forget. It's C sharp minor. Just wanted to look at the first movement of that thing because if it doesn't make you cry, I mean, we talked about in the heavy metal episode about tension, building up the tension, the dissonance higher and higher and higher. Well, we're doing that in this, only it's quieter. There's a whole lot of drama in this music if you can get over the fact that it's classical music and that you're automatically bored by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to do that heavy metal show over again. Can we do that? Sonia pointed out that we didn't point out the similarities between Krupa playing Sing 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 and the Benny Goodman Orchestra and Hot for Teacher. We didn't point that out, which is wrong. And in the end of the recap, I didn't talk about the heavy metal having the dealing with the problems of the soul, like Trent says. And I think that is absolutely crucial. The problems of the soul. Anyway, bugs me.
Yeah.
Well, so you want to listen to a little bit?
Yeah.
Let's
Which
do
one?
it.
Well, let's start with the Haydn. So the way to think about it is it's a conversation. And I stole this from Bill McLaughlin, who has a classical music show, Exploring Music, something like that. Good show. Not as good as ours because he doesn't do heavy metal. But a string quartet is an intelligent conversation. So, for example, we come in here and one of us would say something like, I like bananas. And then somebody else is going to say,
I like them
I
too.
like bananas.
Wow.
Grapes are fine as well.
Mm-hmm. So we have a second theme. Grapes are very fine. But I like bananas better. Because you can peel bananas. And so we're developing the theme. But it's still like bananas and grapes. Those would be the two big things. And maybe you come in and you say, but I really hate the texture of the banana. It really gets on my nerves. And you start developing that tension and you're like, if I never eat another banana, I'll be happy. But grapes are very fine. And so it's a conversation between four people. There's only three of us, but between four people, you take turns, you develop it, you modulate through different keys, but pay attention to the theme. So the introductory theme in this one is, and you're going to hear that go through different keys all through this. So if you can get that in your ear, now you can follow the conversation. So you want to play it a little bit?
Let's play a little bit here.
Now it's a different key. how you add rhythmic interest. So you're building, you can build tension with the speed of the notes.
Hear the viola there, right in the middle.
And then they go back and repeat. So you can listen to the conversation again if you missed it the first time. I said bananas are good.
More emphatic statement of the theme here.
There's also some virtuosity in here. So if you liked Eddie Van Halen noodling around, you get that here too.
You get 4 of them.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the economics of this damn thing. So you've got 4 musicians here that are formidable. And this was 1796, I think is what it was. I looked it up earlier. So you don't have trains. You darn sure don't have automobiles or anything else like that. I think some of this would have been played in people's homes. You certainly would have had some of it at court or in some public venues, but some of it would have been at people's homes. Like, we're going to have these 4 cats come over to our place and play. And you would have had to have paid for that in some way. I mean, this takes an enormous amount of productivity, like economic productivity, to do.
Mm-hmm. But less than the symphony and less than the opera.
Yeah. Maybe less than a rock band. There's no amplifier. There's no electricity. You know, in some ways, this is lower in economic terms than rock and roll is. I'm sure a bunch of people are shaking their heads.
Section.
Yeah, the cello's droning almost like bagpipes.
And so,
minor.
Yep, the same theme but transposed into a minor key. Ramping up for the ending.
Oh, not yet.
Wonderful.
Just love it. It's so much fun. So that's movement one. And I hope you can hear a little bit. You should, dear listener, go back and now that you know some of the main themes, go back and listen to it. When I listen to it, I was talking to one of my kids who, she likes to compose music on her own. She's odd. And she hears music as colors.
Ruh-roh.
I do not. If you hear music as colors, you're kind of an alien to me. I don't know what's going on. You need to compose stuff and teach me things. But I hear it as, for me, it's like spaces and shapes. You know, so the melody is like got a structure, and then I see the structure has changed, and then the structure's changed, and then I know there's violins up here and there's cellos down here. For me, it's all laid out in space for me. It's almost mathematical, and for me, it gives me, I don't know why, here's the mysterious step. It gives me pleasure to see how the clever composer develops the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's a big part of how when I'm mixing music, how I separate the elements in my mind is there's a sound stage in front of you. It might be in your headphones, it might be in your car, the car stereos, or it might be in front of your stereo at home. But there is a sound stage that's set by the speakers in front of you. And left to right, there may or may not be different information, but up and down, there's a lot of very important information here. You can hear the cello, the low notes sitting kind of at the bottom, the viola sitting just above the cello, the violin 1 and 2 sitting above that. But they don't necessarily always stay in that range. Part of the fun of this music is how they will move up and down and interlock and play along with each other and then diverge and then come back together and then move through. It's like I was saying earlier, when the cello sweeps up high, it sounds different. It sounds very different from the way a violin sounds when it's playing low and vice versa. And so part of the fun in this music is listening to that sound stage being manipulated.
Oh yeah, and so you can do things. You have the squeaky voiced violin saying, "I like bananas," and then the big 320-pound, 600 squatter guy says, "I like bananas." And it's the same thing, but it's different in its quality, in its pitch, and I say this is a mystery. I don't know why music is pleasurable to us, but it is. And that's one of the things. See, you take a theme and you move it all throughout your ensemble and turn it upside down and inside out and twist it around and see all the ways that you can do it. It's fun.
Let's talk more about why it's pleasurable.
Yeah.
You know, you say you don't know why, but how do you experience that pleasure, Karl? Show me on the doll where the music touches you. No, how do you? What is this? What is the nature of this?
It touches me here,
Yeah.
and sometimes here.
He pointed at his forehead and then at his sternum.
At my heart, my poetic heart.
I think that Haydn here was clearly thinking when he wrote this, and this is a product of his cognition. This is a product of his mental work. And I get to hear that. I get to hear him communicate with me, and I get to use a part of my intellect that I don't always get to use. Of course, when we hear someone speak, we listen to the way they deliver their sentences, and if they ask a question, they raise the pitch at the end of the sentence, and we use pitch and we listen and all that, but it's not like this. And I think that it scratches a intellectual itch that I don't always know that I have, but then there's also the emotional aspect of it. Because these instruments, I think, particularly in the string quartet, because the instruments mimic the human voice so well, that sawtooth wave Karl loves, and we all love, whether you realize it or not. I think I'll be a materialist here for a minute, maybe, kind of. I think that as infants, if we're going to thrive, we need to respond to mother's voice and to father's voice, and I think we have that. There's something still in us that responds to these different voicings, and if dad scolds you when you're 3, you might cry. Or if the puppy gets run over, I think there's something very basic and instinctual in us that responds to this kind of tone and in this range. And then when it's arranged very carefully, I think that the composer can tap into that, hack us, if you will, and we get something cathartic from it, and it's fascinating.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's Scott's theory of music
I buy
aesthetic.
that. I've heard, and I don't know how this holds up in the science, but I've heard it argued that the original instruments, whenever humans started developing instruments, they did it trying to mimic the sounds that they were hearing in nature around them. I don't know. Maybe. I buy it. I think that one of the things that this reminds me of is listening to birds and animals out in the forest. When you get out way in the woods and you're quiet for a little while.
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part, right? You just sit down and you're quiet for a while. You start to hear nature happening around you. And birds in particular have a lot of qualities to their calls that these stringed instruments are mimicking. Some birds have long, mournful calls, very throaty sounding. Some birds chirp. They have very short little staccato chirps. They're quite high pitched, and you've got everything in between. And what they're doing is they're communicating to each other, and they all need a unique call to cut through the noise. Mm-hmm. If you listen to recordings of the jungle, it's like that times 10, right? You've just got all these animals competing for sonic space, sonic real estate. But yeah, I think there's something to that. It is quite basic, isn't it? That there's something in nature that's fundamental to the way that animals communicate.
I think I like the bird analogy. The characteristic of birds is that they repeat their themes.
Mm-hmm.
So a robin sounds like a robin, a pigeon sounds like a pigeon. That's most of the birds that we have here. Blue jays occasionally. And in the music, to have a theme that's repeated, I think, is comforting. It's why a lot of the more modern music, I don't like it near as much. I like melodies. I like things that I can hold on to.
Well, it has to have a theme, or it's the degree to which it does not have a theme is the degree to which it's noise. Like
yes.
a key is a theme to some degree. It has to have organizing principles. And you plucked out or you tapped out the theme for the string quartet there on your piano earlier, and it's kind of an even higher order theme. It has to be organized to make it music.
Yeah, and one thing I like about it, so I'm giving our silly example of I like bananas.
I can't wait to hear the string quartet Bananas, Opus 1 in E-flat minor.
Terrible key on a violin.
I know.
But in fact, I do not like bananas.
Ooh.
At all. If I never eat another banana, I'm perfectly happy with that. But I wanted to use that as an example for conversation because it is like a conversation. But on the other hand, the cognitive content of it is purely symbolic. I'm not sure if purely formal. That's probably the better way to think about it. So there are no words. Scott's laughing at me. I'm feeling...
He's always the Platonist.
Conversation has a structure and repeated themes and everything, but you're also thinking about what that guy said, and maybe you hate what that guy said, and so you're not paying attention to the interplay of the forms in the structure of it. And in music, especially this kind of music, I can just turn my brain off, follow the themes around where the composer goes. If it means something, it means something. Like I didn't really jot down meanings to any of this stuff. I would jot down in my score like tension rising, tension going, but it's not telling me what to feel. The Dvorak's a little more obvious to me, probably because I'm an American. I thought, this is the prairie, this is the
Well, it's
the
a different
dance.
theme. It's not a different theme. It's a different genre.
Yeah.
It's still the four instruments, but it's romantic. It's not. Haydn that is the classical period, right? Like,
Yeah.
people typically say, well, if it's violins and so on, it's classical music. No, that's not really true. There's Baroque and Romantic, and there are different eras within that sort of traditional instrumentation. And Haydn and Dvorak here are in different eras and different styles.
But if his wasn't titled American, I don't know that I would have thought about prairies and farms.
I listened to it before I read the names, and I said, this sounds a little bit like Copeland.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I don't want to go to that one yet because I want to
Okay.
do movement 2
Okay.
just for a
Yeah.
little bit. Because I
Let's
love
listen.
the second to last chord in movement 2.
Movement 2.
But so movement 2 is, you might know this is the German national anthem. It was a hymn to the Kaiser, God Save the Kaiser, Kaiser Francis, which Haydn wrote the music for. And it's structured, there's either 3 or maybe 4 variations. So you get a statement of the theme, which is very beautiful, and then you have different ways to play it. So variation 1 is the violins play it with the first violin playing sort of a descant, all sorts of noodles over the melody. Variation 2 is down in the lower instruments. I forget what variation 3 is. Variation 4 is a restatement. It's just beautiful. So a theme in variations is a little bit more obvious. It's a more extended thing. So my theme is, I never want to have bananas as long as I live. And then you start adding things to that. I really never, ever want to ever have a single banana ever until the sun burns to a cold cinder.
Can the viola ask, even in banana bread?
Even in banana bread.
Is it banana qua banana or?
It's banana qua banana.
Okay.
I'm not a fan. And maybe then we're going to do it faster. I really can't stand bananas. And then we're going to do it slower. And lyrically, I can't stand bananas. But it's all variations. It's like we're going to take the one thought and we're going to keep doing it over and over again. Beethoven did themes and variations. Bach did these Goldberg variations. The Enigma variations are like a later thing. Elgar is really good. But it's the sort of thing that we don't have in music very much anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of how Socrates would sit with a question. And, in Plato's dialogues, people are continually frustrated with Socrates because he doesn't let a question go. They want to just resolve it and move on with life. And he's like, oh, hold on. No, this is interesting. Let's just keep asking this question. Can we find a different way to ask the question? What if we posed an answer to the question and then tried to poke some holes in it? Okay, yeah, we poked a hole in it. Now we've got a different answer to this question, and let's try that approach. I mean, he was really interested in just sitting with it and soaking in it.
The
It's kind of the same.
dialogues are Plato's theme and variations.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Which one's the theme and which one's the variation?
I don't know.
Yeah, but that would be fun. So you were talking
Yeah.
about playing at a party, and all of us play instruments to one degree or another. If we ever get to be in the same place again, we could bring them and, hey, Trent, come up with a theme. And then we all play a version of it.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe we play
Right.
it together and do another version of it. It's super fun if you are a little bit capable on your instrument. It's just not something we do. We just have set, rock and roll pieces or something.
Right. Right.
Jump, theme and variations. That would have been fun. Well, why don't we listen to a little bit of movement 2 of the Haydn?
All right.
It's calling to my genetic code. And now we get variation 1. It's just the 2 violins. Second violin on melody, first violin on fun stuff.
See, it's like Flat and Scruggs.
Yep.
I love the contrasting textures between the long whole notes and 16th note.
That's so hard to do for amateur me. You've got one person playing this staccato, whatever the hell that is. I mean, it's very busy. And then the lead here is trying to play this legato line over the top of it. It's when you're playing music with somebody and you're at your best, you're listening to them very closely and you're actually playing with them. But when you start putting a piece like this together, or no, not you. When I'm putting a piece like this together, insofar as I can, I almost have to shut the other person completely out. Because if I'm listening to them too carefully, I can't do what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
I'm no pro. The pros can listen and do that, and chew gum, and like swing their foot out of time. It's crazy.
So this is the second variation where the lead is in the cello.
Where it should be.
So cello sounds like a baritone voice, a human baritone voice.
And almost a bit mournful.
So variation 3 is viola. So you get to hear what a viola sounds like, which is kind of like a cello, kind of like a violin. It's the hidden, lost instrument.
It's the middle child. It's a hard place to be.
It's a saxophone.
It's the one that likes grapes.
But the harmony parts, so the other parts, there's ways to develop tension, ways to develop interest. I mean, you can do it with dissonance. You can play the chords that sound that way. You can also do it with rhythm. So here, it's all offset. So the melody is going to be on the beat. Everything else is off the beat. A little bit like jazz. So go ahead with variation 3.
How did they figure out how to do that?
So good. Wait for when the cello comes in. Chromaticism in the cello.
Yeah. Let's talk about counting. You know, when you count, when you're counting your music, this is in 4/4. I'm pretty sure. You got 4 beats. We won't get into it too much, but when you start in 5th grade band, they teach you to tap your foot, and when your foot hits the floor, that's the downbeat. So you can divide those 4 beats into 8s, and if you really exaggerate how you tap your foot, down, up, down, up, down, up, when your toe gets to the top, that's the upbeat. there's where your eighth note is. So if you're tapping your foot along with this, you'll find that some instruments are playing when your foot hits the floor, and others are playing when your toe is at the top of the upstroke.
Yep, you have to be pretty good. Some people just never get that.
Down, up, down, up.
Now this is variation 4, which is a restatement of the theme with the most beautiful string writing you'll ever hear. But he does a thing at the end. You can hear how high a violin can go.
All of these instruments are reaching in those upper registers, all of them.
Okay, listen in the next measure. What the heck was that?
Ooh.
So
Diminished?
very nice.
Ugh.
So there's some cool stuff going on here. So this whole thing is in the key of G. And that's where you're going to end. Okay, with a nice, I forget which inversion this is, a nice inverted G chord. But before you get there, you have low G in the bass.
Diminished chord.
Yep. But on top, it's a C diminished on top of a G in the bass. So you have. And then.
Ooh. Do we have a tritone there?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, because a C diminished. So the C would normally be the fifth in the key of G, right?
Well, the C would be the fourth in the key of G.
Or it'd be the fourth. Sorry, the fourth. And if you diminish it, if you bring it down a half step, then that makes it into tritone, right?
Well, the C to the F sharp is a tritone in the diminished.
Ah, okay.
But the
yeah,
F sharp
okay.
is grinding against that G down here.
Yeah.
It's very cool. It's like I'm going to write a nice reflection on this hymn to the Kaiser, and then I'm going to throw in some death and destruction in metal right before the end.
Yeah, diminished chords lead to bedwetting. Shouldn't do that.
It's so cool. I was listening. What the heck did he do?
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's so unexpected.
Karl, have you heard Tex Ritter's "Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling"?
I do not know. Maybe.
The German national anthem has elements of every time it starts, I think I'm going to hear that, but then it zigs where I thought it was going to zag.
Yeah, I love this piece. There's two more movements, but we're already an hour in. Maybe we ought to do some Dvorak.
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to point out that we've heard there, and this is like all over all of these string quartets, is counterpoint is what we would call it in musical terms. A counterpoint is simply when you're playing two melodies against each other. And sometimes they're literally playing against each other. There's contrary motion, like the cello's coming da na 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 na, while the violin's coming down na 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 na. But they can also just be playing separate melodies and kind of going up and down independently of each other. And it's like you're saying, we've got a conversation that starts, I like bananas. Bananas are really great. I love bananas. And then you start saying it on top of each other, and you speak past each other. And it's funny, like this happens in conversation all the time. You say something. If you ever sat at a dinner table and you're having a conversation with the person across from you, and the person to your right is having a conversation with the person across from them, right? Sometimes it's chaos, but there's kind of that sweet spot where it just works, and you can listen to what they're saying, even though you're aware of the other person. That's kind of what's going on here with this conversation, is that you've got instruments playing against each other, but the key is that they do eventually come back together and resolve every so many measures. And that's where we get those nice little, I don't know what you call those, but the kind of da 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 da.
Cadences?
Resolutions.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. It resolves every so often so that we can come back and refocus.
Yeah. So what the human ear can do, you can hear multiple things at once. We saw this a long time ago with the fugue. If you've ever listened to the end of, I think it's the end of Act 1 of Les Mis. One Day More. I think it's Act 1, whatever. Where everybody's singing, Another Day, Another Destiny. They're all shouting, each with their own theme at the same time all over the stage. And you can hear every single one, and you can follow every single one.
Right.
So music can be more complicated than it usually is, and you can probably follow it.
Yeah, the golden rule in pop mixing is that never give somebody more than 3 instruments at a time. So you got drums, you've got vocals, and then one accompaniment instrument. And somebody's got to take the lead. If you got guitars, then it's got to be guitar. You can't have guitar and piano banging away underneath the vocal. You only get one of them because you got to have drums, you got to have vocals. But in other forms of music, you can do more clever things with it.
I think you can do a little bit more than that. Especially, so a big complaint I have about the way, classical music is on hard times these days. I posted a video that Hilary Hahn did of her standing in some European ballroom playing an unaccompanied Bach violin piece, and she nails it and is beautiful, and she smiles like Eddie Van Halen at the end because she knows she's one of the best violin players in the world, and it's got like 47,000 views. And then I think of what your typical bit of garbage pop music has, like 2 billion views. It's really hard times for classical music. People will promote it as music, as background music for studying. And for me, it's like people who come in the gym, women who come in the gym and say, well, I don't want to get bulky. Then you have to apologize for it. And you apologize for your music. Well, it's good for studying. No, it's terrible for studying. Because if you're going to listen to it, you're going to be following it at a higher level, that it's going to drive all of your math homework out of your brain.
Yeah. I can never listen to music when I'm studying. But I had that exact same thought when I was listening to this stuff is, man, it's almost like I've been trained to ignore this stuff. Mm-hmm. You think about, you listen to movies and you're watching some period piece and there's the ballroom scene, and as soon as the camera cuts to the ballroom, you get the big swell up of the string quartet. They strike up and it's loud for about 3 seconds, and then it all, cut to the lead actor and actress, and then the music's down. And then there we go. Now we have dialogue and story and dance. But it's almost like it's always the background to our media.
Beethoven would fight you if you weren't paying attention. He'd get up, he'd yell at you.
Throw things at you.
There is so much to this music, but you're going to need to sit and listen to it. I think it's better than most of our stuff. I was listening to... It was with the kids in the car, and I forget which piece it was. It was a Mozart piano concerto. It was played on our classical station. And it was so good. I was talking to my kids about it because I have interesting kids. And it's like, did you hear that? We have nothing today we have very little today that's anywhere close to this. And he wrote 500 of them. Not piano concertos, but...
Yeah, I mean, you think about the most progressive songs that are popular, that are on the radio, like Freebird.
Musically progressive?
Musically progressive, yeah. Freebird. There's variations on a theme there, but man, it's exhausting to listen to. I always forget that the song's even on about halfway through the guitar solo, And then at some point, it always hits me. It's like, oh, wait, that's still the same guitar solo. We're still listening to Freebird. Damn.
Ugh.
Yeah, even let's be honest, even Led Zeppelin, Stairway. I mean, it's a fun song, but yeah, it's no Haydn. That's for sure.
No.
That's for sure.
Which
There's
is
a lot
not
more
to say
here.
that it's not good. I love it very much.
That's right. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, we love it. We did a whole episode about it. But yeah, it's not quite the same. It's kind of like, to me, it's like sitting down in nature. It's really hard the first time I go out camping and hiking. It's hard to quiet myself down and be able to just sit and just take it all in. But after you get into it for a while, it's pretty cool. And then you start noticing things around you that you hadn't noticed before, like the birds chirping and yeah. So
I always
You have
ask
to
this.
shut up so you can do it.
that's right.
I always ask this. How is hiking not walking? Like, what has to happen for someone to be hiking and not walking?
Because you don't
Walking
have
in the
to
woods.
hike.
Huh.
Walking, you're going somewhere. Hiking is,
You have special
About-
shoes that you paid more for?
well, not
Yeah.
me. But
I was about to say it's walking with boots. Maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you guys were talking about this more modern music and how it just doesn't hold up in comparison to Haydn there. Well, we've got some stuff that's about a little over 100 years newer than that in the Dvorak. Dvorak. Czech, right? He's a Czech.
yeah.
So we say we pronounce it differently than it reads for us English people. Dvorak. String Quartet number 12 in F major, Opus 96. The American, like Karl just said earlier, he came and lived in a little town of around 300 people for a time in Iowa.
And loved it, apparently.
He wouldn't. And I guess he was inspired by that to write this. It's called The American, colloquially. And let's go listen to, you want to listen to the first movement here, Karl?
Sure.
10 minutes and 29 seconds of this. We probably won't hit it all. How is this American?
You pause it for a moment.
Sure.
Pause it right there. Okay. How's it American? Well, it sounds, I don't know, it sounds American. It's got wide open spaces in it. You have
the opening statement is, yeah, it
It's
sounds
a sunrise,
like a prairie.
right?
Yeah, sunrise. Yeah.
and it's, as I'm sure Trent noticed, it is pentatonic.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds a lot like the kind of Western, movie themes like you hear, where we've got this big kind of heroic statement as they're riding off into the sunset, with the arches behind them.
I think also rhythmically, it sounds, it's really hard for me to think abstractly about this piece. It's full of images for me.
Yeah.
That's why it's romantic, right? It's the romantic era of composition and performance.
And I think the rhythmic interest too, like the repeated da 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 da, it's like dance music. So it's got pentatonic, which is a characteristic of folk music, almost everybody in the world has some kind of pentatonic music that they play. It's one of the most common scales because it's easy.
Yeah, it works over everything.
You don't need all that extra stuff.
Yeah,
No,
it's
got enough notes.
Yeah, anyone can play it.
I have two daughters that are pretty good at piano, and I'll walk over and they'll say, "There's too many notes. There's too many notes on that page."
Jerk.
I can't play that many notes.
This sort of melody-driven, emotive music, this romantic music, is you can hear how it's evocative of place, maybe, and mood, more than the Haydn we listen to. Haydn's, I think, more intellectual. It's more arithmetic, but this is more emotive. Mm-hmm. And our music for movie soundtracks and television is really in this romantic theme or thread or genre, whatever.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever heard, or did you ever watch the black and white television show Victory at Sea about the war in the Pacific?
Yes.
Richard Rodgers wrote the theme for that, and this reminded me of that. Richard Rodgers, Victory at Sea. This is 1952. There it is.
Pentatonic, too.
Yep. Anyway.
The other thing that rang a bell immediately was everyone knows this one, Edvard Grieg's Morning Mood from the Peer Gynt Suite. It's a very similar thing. I think I was just looking that up. I think that came out in, 1875. So perhaps an influence on Dvorak.
Well,
as well.
I don't know Edvard Grieg's Morning Mood by name.
Oh, well,
let's hear it. Okay.
Yeah, you've heard it a million times in Looney Tunes. Yeah, you've heard it everywhere.
I missed a note. Sorry.
It's okay.
I want you to go back.
Romantic.
So that we have. This is the sort of music that's our movie soundtrack. Probably says something about how good it is. When we want to have an epic moment or a moment of high drama or a moment of love, we're not playing Haydn very much. Maybe that second movement, but Haydn's probably a little too intellectual. We're going to play more of the romantic stuff. Romantic means, got to talk about this at some point. Romantic is like, let's feel all of our emotions really strongly. Experience is what is important, and we want to just drive that home. Where Bach and Haydn are going to let you sit back. I've used this analogy before. Romantic music is like that girl at the dance that grabs you, pulls you underneath the bleachers, and kisses you hard.
Uh-oh.
She's not going to let you get away. Whereas Bach is the girl who looks pretty, but she's going to just look pretty, and you have to approach her.
She walks icily past you. It's almost like, I think that we have to recognize that we're very colored in the way that we're looking back to previous eras of music, I think, because so much of what we listen to is in this romantic vein. In other words, I think we have been trained, or we have been groomed to judge music, the quality of music, by its ability to evoke feelings within us. Mm-hmm. Whereas that's not necessarily the goal of Haydn and Bach.
No, I think theirs is to evoke thought.
Exactly right. It's the beauty of the thing itself rather than the thing that it spurs within us. And so in order to really enjoy that music, you have to kind of divorce yourself from the mode you've been in of listening to music, where you're looking for that emotional resonance rather than evaluating the piece on its own merits. And I find that very hard. When we listen to the Bach fugues early on in this show, that's kind of left me cold. I mean, they're beautiful in themselves, but they leave me cold a little bit. But I find as I'm approaching this stuff more often that I'm able to get into it more easily.
I love the Baroque period. It's the best period. It's
the best period, Karl says.
If it's not Baroque, don't fix it. Can Can you play? Go. It's around minute 142.
That's exactly where I stopped earlier. Here we go.
This is some tasty writing. The cowboy has just ridden by and seen her standing in the field, the sun in her hair. And now he turned around to go back to her. Like sweeps of wind. I'm seeing pictures whenever I listen to this. And we get that beautiful melody again.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the Shire, Frodo. This kind of music makes me feel like I want to go home. Like I'm not there, but I want to go home.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where it is either.
The opposite of a rambling song.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got to do Copeland. Aaron Copeland. Is there such a thing as American Romanticism? Copeland and Gershwin? What do you call those guys?
I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it.
This is like 1896 here. I was just looking it up. Copeland. Where is it? I just looked away.
See the strange restatement in the viola right there?
Yeah.
Trill.
It's very strange that cowboy music to me is symphonic.
Yeah.
Well, why is that?
Because of Dvorak and Aaron Copland?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Billy the Kid's in the mid-30s. Rodeo is 42. Appalachian Spring is 44. Fanfare of the Common Man's 42. All that Copeland stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an American mythos from, the West.
Which Iowa ain't.
Iowa ain't the West?
Not
then.
unless you're from Jersey. In 1890? Nah.
I mean, they were panning for gold in California by then.
Yeah, the Dvorak string quartet number 12, mighty good. There's about 35 minutes of that. That's well worth all of your time.
Yeah. My favorite of the bunch, and again, probably because I'm just a hopeless romantic. I think one of the things that I hear there in the minor restatements of the theme, it's almost like when there's something that you recognize in your life that's so beautiful that you love very much, there's always that counter emotion that comes along with it, that once you recognize how beautiful it is and how much you love it, you're afraid of losing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the impermanence of life kind of hits a little harder when you really love something. And to me, that's what that music, those minor restatements of the melody evoke.
I've been in the minor restatement for the last 3 weeks.
Just 3 weeks?
Well.
It's been all year for me. But yeah, it's that's one of the tough things you have to deal with in life, but at the same time, that is what gives those beautiful things. That's what makes them more beautiful. It's the contrast of light and dark, right?
Well, and if you listen to this sort of stuff, and we ought to probably move on to the Beethoven, if you listen to this sort of stuff, it's abstract enough that it can fill the gaps of your own feelings or amplify them and make it better for you. So Scott has this, I forget which one, there's one bourbon or something that he'll tell people to think of something when they sip it, and it makes it different.
Oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind.
You can't remember what it is?
I can see the bottle in my mind. Nika.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, Nika. Yeah. Nika's coffee grain whiskey. And go find yourself a bottle of this if you can.
Yeah.
And before you take a drink of it, think bananas.
I'm not going to do it.
Which Karl hates. Yeah. And once you do, when you drink that, it'll taste like Bananas Foster.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're not primed with that, you might not taste that. But if I prime you with that, you almost always do. Or Lagavulin, you'd say, think seawater, and people will drink it, and they'll say, yeah, I see that. Yeah. But if you say Band-Aids, you'll wreck them because they will taste Band-Aids.
Yeah,
they're both there.
Well, I think about that Walker Percy essay that I believe y'all covered on the other great podcast, Online Great Books podcast. He talks about drinking he only likes cheap bourbon because it's more memorable.
Yeah.
And there's more pleasure per dollar.
And there's more pleasure per dollar, but also that's the cheap stuff really punches you in the face. And
early times is not that bad. For a cheap whiskey, early times is okay.
Early times bottled and bond, dollar for dollar, real good. So here are my cheap ones, guys. Early times bottled and bond, Wild Turkey 101, and Elijah Craig bottled and bond. Dollar for dollar, those are wonderful. You have to spend triple to get a little better.
Yeah.
Don't at me.
Yeah.
So I want to look at the Beethoven thing. So this is Quartet number 14, C sharp minor. Beethoven might be the king of string quartets. I had an idea for a project, Trent, which I'm not good enough to do, but I thought you might be able to, which is... because you can get the music to all this stuff online at imslp.org, which is a great resource if you're into classical music. You can download the score and read it. I probably need to donate. I'll go do that and support them. But you could, because electric guitar is such a wonderful instrument, it really is. I thought, what if somebody did the Beethoven string quartets with electric guitar?
I bet somebody has. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds, it's interesting.
That would be fun.
That would be
so
fun.
this one is, I'll play the theme for you and then give you some suggestions. So hope I play it right. So it's that grind on that third, descending third. And
It
you're
almost
gonna hear
sounds
that,
like arabesque to me. A
yeah,
little bit of that Middle Eastern scale in there.
yeah, and that's going to repeat all over. I think it's probably got some structure of the fugue. This is where the genuine classical music people say, well, it's not quite a fugue. Well, it's kind of fuguish to me. But this is the sort of piece that you can play it and you can think any number of things and see what this does to you. You can think, here's some suggestions. You can think of your first girlfriend, your grandparents' funerals, the first time you saw the ocean. And this music will just fill in that experience and make it fuller. Or I could think of, I just drove by my childhood house. I took my kids to see it where I lived until I was 7 and showed them my grandfather's place. I could just think of those two places and me walking between the two.
Tasting notes with Karl.
And you can come up with your own. So it's a melancholy piece. It's an adagio. Well, I don't know. See what you think.
Right. Beethoven String Quartet number 14 in C sharp minor. Here we go.
You can hear that repetition in the cello of the theme.
And it's a completely different sound than the other two quartets. Themes in the cello.
Boy, that's busy.
Yeah. Beautiful dynamics.
Didn't resolve it.
Nope, not to the end. Hear the fugue?
Yes.
Yeah.
Continual restatement of the melody, one after another.
No, Beethoven never heard this.
Yeah.
Tension and release. And then ends on unison C sharp. So it has that C sharp, I think it's a C sharp major chord. So you get a release, but at the end it just goes to unison. So nope, not quite.
That's a lot of music out of 4 instruments.
Yeah. It's interesting because this has more emotion, for lack of a better term, than the Haydn piece for me, but it's almost amorphous. It's unwilling to push you one way or another. It just sits right there in between a whole lot of emotions.
It's metal, bro.
So metal.
Yeah, it's I don't know, it's evocative for me. It's hard to listen to.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Very complex.
Well, because for me it's emotional too. So this hits me. I mean, there's plenty of intellectual grist for the mill in it,
Yeah.
but it's super melancholy. The rest of that quartet is weird and awesome, but that first movement's pretty neat. Yeah, so there's if you can get over some stumbling blocks that it's classical music and you're used to studying to it, that it's not loud, that there's no lyrics. This is a wonderful little art form that Haydn perfected. People still write string quartets. I'm not too much on modern music, but it's still a form that's alive. We went to a string quartet concert on Saturday, so they're still out there. It was kind of ridiculous. It was in a town. This is why I went to it's in my original hometown, and it was a concert on the green, and they were trying to attract the young people. It was pathetic, I thought, because they played Havana, and they played some Adele song, and amidst the Haydn and Handel, and I was looking at their audience. I and my 2 daughters were the youngest people there, and I'm 49. If you added our ages up, we might have been the youngest people there. So they weren't getting the people they wanted to get, which it's really hard for classical music. I don't know why. It's so good, and there's so much of it. It's so much better than the stuff we typically listen to, but it makes demands on you as a listener.
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
People don't listen to music for the same purposes anymore. We don't.
Right.
We had the Bob Wills thing that was all about dance. I don't know exactly what top 40 contemporary music is about now, but we don't use music for the same thing as it was used for when these gentlemen wrote it.
And I think a lot of people, if I go back to my walking analogy, if you live in an urban area like many people do, where can you go and sit down quietly and enjoy nature? I mean, I can go to a park just a mile down the road, but, I'm going to hear the 18-wheelers squealing down I-35 and all the roads around me. You know, it's not really, I can hear construction, like cranes crashing in the background. There's not really a lot of place to go and actually be meditative and have your little Walden moment.
Well, there ought
I think
to.
this, you ought to, but it's hard to do. You really got to seek it out. You have to go somewhere else to do that. And I think that's kind of the same thing with this music. You have to create space to listen to this music.
Yeah, people will sit down and watch a show, whatever that is, binge watch, whatever. You can do the same thing with this. You can eat popcorn and do this, but you can't really do anything else, right? So, put your headphones on and put this on and spend some time with it.
Yeah, I think it would repay your time.
Karl sent us a playlist here in Spotify. Everybody wants us to post links to our playlists. Yeah, I can't be bothered. It takes work. This playlist is an hour and 28 minutes long, and it took me longer than that to listen to it the first time. And then this morning I was driving. I thought, well, I'm going to listen to this again. It's no good. Driving with this on, even with me trying to pay attention, it's no good. I think this requires about as much concentration as an audio book that you want to get something out of. Like you really have to listen to it. You can't space out for a minute and then come back to it, or you lose the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if most of us listen on streaming music, this is going to make it hard because you're probably streaming it on a gadget, which is a built-in distraction machine. So you're going to have some self-discipline to get through this stuff. I mean, it's not that you can't listen to it while you're doing other stuff. You're just not going to get as much out of it, and you might think it's just fluff and background noise. It's not. It's let it into your mind and your heart, and it's going to tug on them.
I had a thought the other day. You can get a number of compact discs on Amazon for very cheap. I mean, you can buy used CDs of just about anything for like $1, $2. And it might not be the worst idea to go get a nice CD player, which again, you can find very cheaply, plug it into a hi-fi. Again, you can get fairly cheap, but just a real stereo system, and build a little CD collection of some good stuff. And that might not be such a bad way to go. Vinyl is cool, but it's very expensive. It weighs a metric ton if you have a shelf full of vinyl. I can't tell you how many people I've seen online that have broken shelves and put dents in their floor. But yeah, it might not be a bad idea to if you really want a high quality listening experience, go find some CDs of this stuff, some good performances, look it up, and go buy them.
Oh, there's tons of it at Half Price Books.
So cheap, yeah, and high quality.
What are we going to listen to next time, lads?
Well, this was mine. You guys pick.
Yunt to do Copeland? Yunt to do bluegrass?
I say
Copeland.
bluegrass for next, because Copeland takes me studying scores again, and that's
it's
heavy.
Okay,
it's a lot. Yeah, we may maybe the Copeland show could maybe be a Copeland Gershwin type show, because I think they're so interesting, both of them.
we have to do 4 shows on each of those guys. We can't combine that. All right,
yeah, we could do bluegrass. That would fit, I think, with the stuff we've covered recently.
Okay. Well, we'll put together a bluegrass playlist and dive into that. Bluegrass is surprising. It is not as old as you guys think it is, listener, probably. It's not. Like, you listen to that stuff and you're like, oh, they found this shit in like 1861, and no, it's fairly new. And I'm always interested in how technology and economics have driven the evolution of this music, and we talked about it a little bit here. And there's some stuff that happened that caused bluegrass to come around that had to happen, or otherwise it wouldn't have worked. So that'll be interesting to talk about. Mm-hmm. I like me some bluegrass, that high lonesome sound. I like this stuff too. I particularly like the Dvorak. If you if you're having trouble limping in on this, I recommend that one to start with. String Quartet number 12 in F major. There are more sort of hooks that the modern ear can grab hold of and let it pull you along with. Then I'll tell you, I struggle with the Beethoven. I recognize it as brilliant. I recognize he's doing very interesting things with the score and the instruments and the possibilities. But boy, it's just too much.
Well, it's fine. I think that's reasonable. You can graduate up to Beethoven as you go. And the earlier Beethoven stuff is more Haydn-esque. The later stuff is wonderful, but weird.
Yeah, what did not being able to actually hear the music do to his composing? You know, I think it made it more far out, man.
He got prog rock. He went prog.
I mean, it has to be more cerebral, right? You know, he can't hear it. It's more abstracted at that point, I think. And the more deafer he is, the more far out that stuff gets, I think.
I don't know. There's plenty of shows we can do on Beethoven.
Yeah,
we'll do those.
Yeah.
Next up, Sonia, the bluegrass. Thank you guys so much for listening to Music and Ideas. Karl was going to say something.
Tell a friend.
Yeah, please
Just
do
gonna
tell
plug.
a friend. Do tell a friend. Our last show was our biggest one yet, so thank you guys so much for that, because I tell you what, iTunes ain't helping us do that. Google Play ain't helping us do that. It's you all that are doing it, and I appreciate it more than you know. So send that on and help us keep the lights on here. Go to not Music and Ideas. Go to that other website we have, onlinegreatbooks.com/music, and sign up for our newsletter there. We've got interesting stuff going on in the newsletter and in that program. You know, Trent likened string quartets to Socrates. So go try out a little Dvorak, and then go to our archive.org, download the whole thing before they nuke it, and then find a Benjamin Jowett translation of Plato's The Meno, Meno, and read that thing. You'll be surprised how much fun it is and how amazing that stuff is.
Is that the one where these Greeks are talking to each other in like Victorian gentlemen?
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
Top of the morning to you.
Cheerio, Socrates. What is
A
virtue?
little bit. Yeah, it's not my favorite, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good, and you'll get to see what he's. You'll see what he's talking about. So forward this on to one of your friends. Send them a link. Just text it over to them. That'll be a big help to us, and then we will talk to you in 14 days.